Hey, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Political No Brainer, podcast where we move past winner takes all politics and into real conversations. I'm Jeff Rabinowitz. This season, we're bringing on guests and voices from all sides to challenge assumptions, bridge divides, and build a better understanding of today's biggest issues. And I'm with Kevin Howard, our one of our many premier guests, one of our premier guests. We had a great day today, a little team building. We spent the day out at Magic Kingdom. Enjoyed a nice day out there. Talking. We started off the day with this podcast, and I realized what we didn't. I didn't manage to record it, so that's all right because we had a good time talking about it and getting ready for even a better version, I guess you would say. So, Kevin, tell us about your book, of course, because that's where we always want to start off. We want to know Onward at Last, Kevin Howard. It's a great book. I've got the book here, Onward at Last, Presidential Election Edition, 2024 presidential election. Um, Take over, Kevin. Tell us about the book a little bit.
Thank you, Coach Trippy. And first and foremost, I want to thank you for a great day. I mean, it is a pleasure. We live in such a beautiful country. It is. I live in the Pacific Northwest in Washington State. You live in the southeastern part of the United States in the great state of Florida. So being able to fly across the country, all 2,600 miles, to be able to spend a day with you and spend the weekend here in Florida, it's been a great day. So, but to answer your question. So, Onward at Last is a book of social commentaries that represents um, the steep wisdom of my lived experience. And the reason why I thought it was necessary to share it, or I felt compelled to share it, is because I, like many Americans, notwithstanding whatever level of wealth or privilege you enjoy, had come to a place in my life where I had achieved the American dream, and not many of us get to do that. And yet I found it to be hollow. I found my life to be without meaning. And so that sent me spiraling into some years of introspection. How is it possible when you do play the game by the rules, you compete well, you take care of yourself and your family, you gather the fruits of your labor, and yet you find, is this all there is? And what I learned in that process is that I didn't really know my own values, my own virtues. I had adopted those values and virtues based on the culture in which I grew up in here in the United States. And so I was using that measuring stick as if I had even gone through the trouble of asking myself, what does Kevin Howard find important? And so by not asking that, I really set up a whole life that was based on doing what I should be doing according to the rules of our society and the incentives of our society, but it didn't serve me. And I felt like if I was in that situation, maybe a lot of other folks here in the States feel the same way. So I wrote Onward at Last. It was published by a wonderful independent publisher called Atmosphere Press, based in Austin, Texas. And they first published the first edition of the book, in December 2022. And then, based on what I perceived as the false narratives dominating the 2024 presidential election, I wrote a new chapter called America at the Crossroads. And it had 21 additional commentaries, and it had a new forward by a former Wall Street investment banker named John Fullerton. Um, and that version was published in October of 2024. And so I'm glad you asked me about the book, and we're going to talk about it. But it really just shares with our fellow Americans and anyone who's growing up here, because it comes from an American perspective, maybe a new path to finding meaning and fulfillment in our lives. And so I'd love to get into it and talk about it.
Let's jump right into it. So you know what? And we talked about this today because we really, like I said, team building. We sort of plotted how we're going to do this, and there's so much in this book. And even though I'm reading right off the pages. Every page needs further analyzation. So let me just kick it off by saying, so every generation experiences an iconic moment, and that will always be frozen in time. So, and then you use the examples, for example, the boomers when MLK and RFK were assassinated. And then for the Gen Zers, it was when John Lennon was assassinated. And I don't take assassinations lightly, no matter who they are. So to Charlie Kirk, we're very sorry for the loss of his life and for his family. I don't, I'm not even. I'm just going to say I'm extremely sorry. Political assassinations are a terrible scenario, and they shouldn't be. They just shouldn't happen. So then we go into from millennials when the Twin Towers came
Coach, can I
down.
jump in for a second?
Yes,
I
sir.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but you had inadvertently said Gen Zers were defined by John Lennon's. It was actually the Gen X.
Gen Xers. I did. I'm sorry. Gen Xers.
Yeah, because the
Gen
Gen
Xers.
Zers, that's the
That
youngins.
generation. Sorry. And
They
earlier
weren't
I
born
made
yet
a
when John died.
made the mistake of mistaking MLK for Malcolm X. So I mean, maybe it's my eyesight, but
No worries,
um,
my friend.
so and then the defining moment in this book for millennials was the Twin Towers coming down. The defining moment for the Gen Z was Israel committing genocide. And then earlier, like when we talked, I said, "What about COVID?" So let me not discount the genocide in Gaza. It's just that I feel like the Gen Zers have a lot to think about, and Gaza is very much one of them. We got into it. And I said, as it turns out, most Generation Z was actively participating on TikTok. TikTok, much of their horror was live streamed. The genocide ripped the facade off the historical narratives they have been told and exposed the establishment as sociopathic liars. This genocide in Gaza we described. It's just this continued. So like we talked, it's Gaza Strip. So for those who don't know, is one of the most densely populated areas in the world, and Israel said that every Palestinian is responsible for October 7th, 2023, because they elected Hamas. I don't believe for a minute that they willingly elected Hamas. I think Hamas they knew to elect Hamas for their own safety, but I don't think they really had multiple choices of candidates. I don't think there was a Hamas and there was a Mahmoud Abbas, and I don't think there was any other leaders running. I think Hamas was the powerful force in that region, most densely populated in the world. Israel used the logic that every Palestinian is responsible because they elected Hamas. So again, I discount that theory. Very, very discount that theory. So go on and so let's get into it. Uh
Yeah.
when
As you see, the thread that I laid out the generations because it is a part of our tradition that the next generation rebels against the previous generation. That's very normal. But the thing about what happened to the Gen Zers when Israel responded to Hamas's attack on them on October 7th by saying that there are no innocent Palestinians in Gaza because they had voted for Hamas as their leaders, which had occurred actually in 2005, so 18 years before this incident occurred, right? The impact that that had, see, each one of these major events, when John Lennon was assassinated in New York, what I lived in New York at the time, and literally my English teacher in high school, right? All he did was sit at his desk and cry and play John Lennon songs all day. I mean, it was it the it was the kind of thing that you start to remember where were you when this thing happened, right? And they tend to be tragic things. And for while COVID was very impactful for Gen Z, along with everyone else, there's no doubt COVID is impactful in 2020. Why this genocide in Gaza? And we need to get into why it's a genocide in Gaza, but why this had real impact on Gen Z in their voice on TikTok, because this is where so many of them were, was as a matter of history, we had taught them that we got attacked on 9/11, essentially because they hate us for our freedoms. That's what the President of the United States said. And we have not provided them or any Americans with a coherent additional response for why they attacked us. Now, and I hope in this conversation we get into what we actually know, what are the facts, because we actually do know why they attacked us. Okay, but that said, from the perspective of Gen Z, this had been the history that they were told, that we were attacked by these people, these radicals who hated America because of our freedoms. And then they come to learn that Osama bin Laden had written a letter to America explaining why he attacked us on 9/11. And it was published in the Guardian newspaper in the spring of 2002. Okay. And we don't know about it. I never knew about this letter because the establishment media and our government suppressed it. So from the spring of 2002 until November 2023, that letter sat in the archives on the website of the Guardian newspaper, and it got discovered by Gen Z on TikTok in October 2023 because Netanyahu and his government made the same argument that bin Laden made in his letter. Bin Laden said that he was attacking Americans because Americans had voted for the government who was persecuting Muslims around the world. And then bin Laden laid out a series of actually factually verifiable things, such as the United States overthrowing the democratically elected government of Iran in the 50s and installing the Shah of Iran, who then persecuted his people for over 25 years, right? Until we protected him and got him out of the country. So, what that said in Gen Z's voice, the idea that we were supporting the rationale that bin Laden had justified killing 3,000 Americans. Now, because the Israelis were doing this to the Palestinians and we were supporting them, this changed the generational rite of passage. Because even though my generation, Generation X, had a rebellion against the boomers, we didn't reject the boomers. We didn't break the rite of passage. The millennials didn't break the rite of passage to my generation, right? This issue exposed the establishment who were advocating in defense of Israel. That the idea that because they were attacked, it was okay to kill innocent civilians. All people in Gaza are guilty. Children, babies, everyone is guilty. This exposed the establishment as pathological liars. And now Gen Z doesn't, they reject virtually everything that we have said. It ended the credibility that anyone who advocated in defense of Israel and that rationale, they lost their credibility. And the magnitude of the expression, it wasn't just a random few specs. I saw posts from Gen Zers with a million sightings, a million followers. It became so rabid out on the internet. And what people were saying, what they were saying, the one with the million followers said, I will never, ever believe what the establishment tells me about my history again. Okay, it got so bad that the US government forced TikTok to pull access to and force the Guardian newspaper to remove bin Laden's letter to America in 2002 that had been on in their archives from for 21 years, right? That's been pulled off. And if you go to the Guardian newspaper and you go into their archives, it's labeled bin Laden's letter to America, but it's been removed. Okay. That's how bad it was. So this is the significance leading into the 2024 election
So
is
let me
that the lies that we have been told have finally broken the generational rite of passage. And our children are looking at us now and they don't believe us anymore. Not if we're still advocating and telling those same lies.
so when we take it to one, like you said, we've got this letter from bin Laden, we've got this moment in time that we suddenly there's this realization the government's been lying to us. But I feel like when there's been this realization, we were constantly getting kind of fooled by the government for so many different reasons. But then that's the understanding that the Gen Zers saw this genocide in Gaza, and the justification and the logic, and it was the same logic that Bin Laden used. Bin Laden attacked America, and we attacked him. Then we get into again, and this book is right here on my desk, where the war is a racket, and it's a great book, and I recommend it. We get into this logic. War is a racket by General Smedley Butler, one of the most decorated Marines at his time, the most decorated Marine, and then over time there's been Marines that have been decorated more than him, but probably not significantly more than him. He was a pretty decorated Marine, but it's a business. It's a part of our economy. Like you call it the military. Um,
Industrial complex.
right. The military. How do you say it again?
The military industrial complex.
Industrial complex. It's a business. And so I've told you, like everybody I've said, so when people argue the logic, why do we owe China trillions of dollars? Why are their economy is essentially pretty stable most of the time. Yeah, it's not, sometimes there's a fluctuation in the growth, but there's always growth. Whereas they don't have these spastic gyrations we have. We look for in China, we say if there's not a 9% GDP, there's a crisis. And it's like, well, wait a minute, they're at 7.5%. That's not really a crisis. It's not the 9% we've come to expect, but the 7.5 and this isn't exactly a time to start offering CPR on their economy. So, but our economy has always got these spastic gyrations because of the military economic complex. So we're always involved in so many different wars. We're always sending our weapons. We're essentially getting paid back over time, but it's money we really don't have, and essentially we're borrowing the money to buy the stuff we're sending over, and then ultimately getting the money back that we borrowed. It somehow it doesn't really work out. And so over and over and over and over again, we get lied to by our government. Doesn't matter if you're red or blue. Doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. They both have a vested interest in seeing to it that there's an enormous underclass. They both have a vested interest to seeing to it that we never level up. So, um, and then comes the very wealthy and the very powerful. And like we said, the concentration of wealth is just only getting worse and worse. The billions and the billions are really owned by the 1%, by 1% or less than 1%. The rest are really um so and
Coach, I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying, but it's really important to differentiate. Yeah, there's no doubt. We have a long history of recognition that we've been lied to. And I don't think the Gen Zers are naive of thinking they thought the government would never we would never tell them a lie. And now they've discovered we're lying. Genocide is different.
it's so
And we
different.
have it's right. And that's what I'm saying. It is a normal thing for for a preteen. There comes a time when you're 5 and 6 and 7 years old, and parents are using Disney movies to teach different types of morals. And we use the Christmas story and we do all this other stuff. Okay, that creates a beautiful, wonderful, safe little fantasy land for these children. And then as they grow into their preteens, they start to realize that some of these stories that they believed in, like the tooth fairy that we told them about, are not true. And it is much literature has been written, parenting literature, that the biggest tension with young people as they go from that fantasy land to realizing what is the truth is coming to their parents and asking them about what is true, and their parents not being prepared to have that conversation. And so they continue to not tell them the truth. And so therefore what happens is the children don't they start to lose trust that the parents will be truthful with them when they're talking about real things, as they start to like people, as they start to want to have sex, as they start to want to explore with alcohol and drugs and stuff like that. So this is the normal tension of being a young person growing into your adulthood. So they're not naive. Genocide is different. So let's take this moment, because I want everyone to understand who's listening to this call. There is no ambiguity on how to answer the question of whether Israel is committing genocide. Where the problem is the narrative we've been told. So the narrative that we have been told that has allowed the United States to not only defend Israel, but provide money, weapons, logistical support, and use the United States veto authority at the United Nations in the United Nations Security Council to diplomatically prevent the rest of the world from protecting the Palestinians at the United Nations. 4 times we have vetoed votes where over 150 nations were trying to require Israel to stop engaging in the genocide against the Palestinians. Okay. So
So hang on, let's just tell our
this,
listeners real quick the power of the veto power at the UN and why I think, at least, the veto power shouldn't be there.
but listen,
So,
no, coach, no, we should know. It's important that we don't digress yet,
okay,
because we're going to lose people in this call who believe that Israel is not committing genocide. So let's
okay,
clear
go
up
ahead.
the
Okay.
facts that they can verify. There is a document called the Genocide Convention. It is only 4 pages long. Okay. It was established in 1947. The United States ratified this document under US law, under the supremacy clause of the Constitution. The priority of laws are the US Constitution is the top. The next level of priority goes to treaty law, treaties that you have ratified, like the Genocide Convention. Then there's federal law, then there's state law, then there's local law. That's the order of priority. The United States in 1988, led by Senator Joe Biden, ratified the Genocide Convention. So it is right below our Constitution as required law in the United States. Okay. The rationale that we have given, that our president gave, and that Israel claims that justifies what they're doing as not genocide, is that they have a right to defend themselves because Hamas attacked and killed 1,100 Israelis and took 252 hostages on October 7th, 2023. The reason why that is a bold-faced lie is not because it didn't happen, is because the Genocide Convention does not provide an affirmative defense for genocide. In other words, unlike murder, if you murder someone because they were hurting you and you were defending yourself, the right of defending yourself would be an affirmative defense because you murdered the person trying to defend yourself. There is no such affirmative defense for genocide. None. Israel made that very argument in the International Court of Justice, which is the only court in the world that has jurisdiction to decide what is genocide. On January 26, 2024, the International Court of Justice ruled against Israel's claim that the case should be thrown out, that they're committing genocide, because there is no self-defense justification for genocide. Point blank. The thing is Joe Biden knows that. The thing is that our establishment knows that. They know that we ratified the Genocide Convention. The Israelis also ratified it. All the European countries also ratified it, right? 150 countries in the world ratified it. So the reason why it's absolutely genocide that they're doing is because the justification they gave, there is no genocide is the crime of crimes. It does not, there's no, under no conditions can you justify genocide. and the International Court of Justice found that South Africa had presented sufficient evidence that more than likely Israel is committing genocide. And they didn't stop there. They ordered Israel to stop blocking by a vote of 16 out of 17 judges. 16 out of 17 judges, 16 to 1, voted that Israel had to stop blocking food supplies and essential supplies to the Palestinians. That vote included the Israeli judge on the International Court of Justice. Okay. Okay. So, yeah, Israel is committing genocide. There is no question they're committing genocide. And the worst part of it is that our leadership absolutely knows what I'm saying is true. And what I want everyone who can hear this call is to go on the internet and get a copy of the Genocide Convention, 4 pages, very easy to read. And then go on YouTube and put a search for the International Court of Justice ruling on January 26, 2024, and you will hear Chief Judge, President of the court, an American justice, read out the ruling of the court. And you decide for yourself, is there any confusion
There's
that
no
Israel is
confusion.
committing genocide?
So let me
There,
answer that. There's no confusion. It's genocide.
it's
It's
genocide.
genocide. I've now
Right.
so okay. So and then okay, so let me so how do we decide the lesser of two evils when an incumbent is enabling an ongoing genocide and the challenger is a felon facing multiple criminal prosecutions? So this is the first page I'm reading of your book, and so I say the multiple criminal prosecutions, this 13 felonies, the fact that he was
Yes.
convicted in the court of civil law for rape, the
Yeah.
fact that the fact that a victim of him defaming her character was awarded $83 million and reaffirmed over
Yes.
and over again. It hasn't
Yes.
affected his political gravitas. It hasn't affected his ability to get elected. And to ask, but to beg the question, how can we? How we're choosing between this guy that's been criminally convicted, it hasn't affected him. Then there's who is the lesser of two evils? The guy that's enabling genocide. Well, there's never been a politician in Washington that's put the brakes on Israel. There's never been. Like we said, IPAC, the Israeli Political Action Committee, is the most powerful political action committee in the world, in America. There's never been a. So when we think of those when we think of how it's consequential, who do we pick? Do we pick the president that's convicted of felonies, or do we pick the president that can't stand up to Israel? Well, we almost get to the logic that we feel like every politician's a criminal, like the Italians say, the stinks from the head to the tail. So and then and then we get to the logic of how that no president has ever stood up to Israel. And I pointed out to you earlier that essentially, inadvertently, Joe Biden did stand up to Israel when he said, "We're not selling you any more 2,000-pound bombs. You've dropped 500 on Gaza that you probably had in your inventory already." And Netanyahu replied, "If you want us to stop the war in Gaza, give us the weapons we need to finish the job." Well, when you've dropped 500 of these 2,000-pound bombs on a small area that's 26 by 6 miles, 26 by 6 miles long, the most densely populated area in the world. And that bomb decimates the infrastructure. It takes years to resurface the infrastructure after one of those is dropped. And you have Joe Biden say, "We're not supplying you with any more of those one particular bombs." And in the contractual agreement, when they were sent to Israel, they were only supposed to use for minefield clearing, not genocide on Gaza. So when we try to decide who's the lesser of two evils, there is no deciding it because we've already decided over and over again
Coach,
over the
I
years.
got to push back. I got to push back on that statement. The idea that the only person that stood up to Israel is Joe Biden, who's financed and enabled them to commit genocide, which no American president has
He didn't
ever done.
stand up to him in an
Right.
effective
No,
way,
no,
but I really
no,
feel
no,
like he
no.
was the one
No,
president that
no,
said no to
no.
something.
What did he say no to? He said
Four or
no
five,
to
two
not no,
thousand
to
pounds.
no, right. When we had urban combat in the war in Iraq, we had limited our tonnage to 500-pound bombs
Our
and
own
right.
at our
But
own operation.
yes, yes, exactly. No, no. So it is not even a question we don't even have to get to the triviality of whether you're using a 500-pound bomb or a 2,000-pound bomb on civilians,
No, we don't.
not not differentiating between enemy combatants, people who actually attacked,
And
and
civilians.
innocent civilians, children, women, old people, innocent men who had nothing to do with it. Okay, so first and foremost. Second, actually Reagan actually called Israel up in a similar persecution of Palestinians and told them to knock it off, and they did in one day. You check the paper,
No, I
do the
believe it.
Google.
I believe it. I
Okay,
wasn't
so
informed
so when
before.
you
I
look,
wasn't informed of that, but I believe it.
but okay, so what I'm trying to say here is, so that I wanted to push to push back on, and again, this I don't know if this is a I don't know what the is it whataboutism or whatever, but again, genocide is different.
It's
It
so
really
different.
is. And so when you decide what I said there is the next line is America. America is at the crossroads because, in my opinion, what the Democratic Party did in 2024, how they manipulated their primary process, how they forced Joe Biden down our throats, the Democratic Party, and then turned around and once they realized that he's absolutely way past it and stuff like that, shoehorn Kamala Harris in like that, right? Without any type of small d
Well,
democratic process. But here's the thing. My point to you here is the Democrats did the impossible. America has said that the Democrats have made Donald Trump the lesser of two evils. And what I'm saying is you cannot look at the voting distribution of the 2024 election and not say America has said that the Democratic Party has done the impossible. They've made Donald J. Trump the lesser of two evils. So let's go over the demographics very quickly. Again, every major demographic, men, women, whites, blacks,
which is in your
Hispanics,
book. Which is in
Asians,
your book.
yes, every age level, all of them trended to Trump. More of them voted for Trump, except for people who were over 60, 65 and older. And they dropped from 52% in 2020 to 50%. But everyone else, every major demographic in the country trended towards Trump. But that's not enough. All seven battleground states, he won. When's the last election that any president won all? Obama never won all seven battleground states. Okay, that's not even enough.
Well, hang
That's
on.
not even enough. No, no, no. Let's put it all out there and then you can respond, right? 98% of all counties in America, LA County, Manhattan County, the bluest of blue, voted more for Trump than they did in 2020. And the ultimate of ultimate examples is Starrs County, Texas. Starrs County, Texas is a border county in Texas. It's also the most Hispanic county in the United States. 97%, according to the US Census Bureau, 97% of the citizens in Starrs County, Texas are Hispanic. Starrs County, Texas has voted for the Democratic nominee for president in every election from 1896 to 2020. And in 2024, Starrs County, Texas voted for Trump by 16 percentage points. So when I say that has said, America has said that the Democratic Party has made Donald J. Trump the lesser of two evils, that's what I mean. There is not a demographic in this country who's not affirming what I'm just saying.
So let me say I agree. I know you're going to think, "Oh my God, what just happened?" I agree. But you know what? We go back to the original point that Gen Zers were lied to. They realized they were lied to. Do you realize we were lied to? So Joe Biden gets to the debate floor and he can't function. He can't function. And when the White House finally has to reply, one of their replies, there was many, but one of them was he's done at 9 o'clock. At 9 p.m., he's done for the day. It's like we talked earlier. The president has to be functional at 2 a.m. If I were the president, you wake me up at 2 a.m., I'm going to wake up groggy. I'm going to be alarmed. I'm not, where's my pants? Where's my shirt? What do I do? But then I'm snapping
Coffee.
right out of it. I drink a little coffee. He's done. According to them, he's done at 9 p.m. So we've been lied to. When did he start being done at 9 p.m.? When did this particular concern start? Because that was when the Democratic Party should have fessed up. It's time we take him out. But they never fessed up that there was a problem and put him back in the running. Now you're saying force down our throat. No, we had a feeling he was the incumbent. He was entitled to the nomination. He won the nomination. When the lie was uncovered on the debate floor, on the national debate floor, and Donald Trump was a showman his whole life. He's one time Joe Biden was saying something. He says, Donald Trump said, I don't know what he's saying. He wasn't being a showman. You would think Donald Trump, the actor, the what is the show he does? You're fired, whatever the
Oh,
hell is it?
yeah, no,
The
the
Apprentice. The
apprentice.
Apprentice. You would have thought he wasn't being a showman. He was literally being genuine. He said, I don't know what he's saying. None of us knew what he was saying. This is a concern. So when you look at the trends, when you look at the trends of everything essentially
Yeah.
going Donald Trump's way. And I've always said, yes, he won all 7 swing states. So let's explain the election theory in the United States. Both candidates, red and blue, run. They're both going to get to the what is it, the 248 mark as far as electoral votes. Okay, it's 270 that gets you to win, right? So it's the 7 swing states that gets you to 270. Somehow, that's where the math goes. Somehow you got to pick up those other 22 votes, 23 votes. I guess it's 270 gets you to win. 22 votes
Yeah.
from those 7 swing states. Donald
Yes.
Trump won all 7.
Yeah.
Why? Because we were lied to. But it was a blatant, egregious lie. We have a problem. We have a president that doesn't function, that mentally doesn't function after 9 p.m. according to his own staff. I'm just answering the question of how this swing went. I'm not saying, so was he the lesser of two evils? Yes. So then you say, okay, we've been screwed. We've been discovered. Our bullshit's been discovered. So now I was proud of the Democratic Party because generally I thought they were the ones that would have dithered and deliberated, and we wouldn't have even had a candidate on election day. We'd have still between three beating each other up over who is the candidate. They nominated Kamala, who just says, "I'm gonna do everything Joe did. I'm gonna essentially. I'm not. What would you do different? I think it was on the View. What would you do different?
On the
Nothing,
view.
basically, nothing,
I
nothing.
can
Everything's
think of
fine.
nothing that I
So
would do
okay, so
differently.
you're telling us this man appealed to the progressives and said, "I'm not shutting down the border." And then you're not going to shut down the border. So for 4 more years, we're going to have this crazy, wide open, wild, wild west border. You're telling me that, right? So that's how the swing went. That's how everybody, all these dynamics that you're looking at went his way. Okay, so how? This is the question. I guess it's not in the book. This is not the end. It's in the book. How do we get to a point where we've got a competent president? We've got where we have a competent Congress. What's next for us?
Well, first and
And
foremost,
I'm not
again,
saying some people say Trump is very competent. I particularly don't agree, but he can't. I mean, he technically can't even run again. He's almost 80 years old at this day, and he's still got
yeah,
3 more years to go. They think he had a stroke the other day because his whole face is drooping. And then they're worried about his hand having bruises, and they're saying it's handshaking, which is kind of not the truth either. But so what happens in he lives through his term? He JD Vance did they decide JD Vance should be the nominee. How do we get to the point where the Democrats have a viable candidate now?
well, all I can say is this. First and foremost, the reason why Trump has won 3 consecutive nominations in the Republican Party is because the neocons are the establishment Republicans, right? And the Republican electorate has recognized that they have been betrayed by the neocons for the last 20 years, since George W. Bush. So they are voting for an anti-establishment option. And the only anti-establishment option that the Republicans have presented in 3 election cycles is Donald Trump. Now, the interesting thing about Donald Trump being a billionaire, we can question that, but he's presenting himself as a billionaire, and that he can be the anti-establishment candidate gives you an indication of how vapid both the Democratic establishment and the Republican establishment, and how tone deaf there are to what's happening with most Americans.
Oh yeah, they're tone deaf.
Okay. And so,
Politicians in general are tone deaf. Yes, they're convinced that they're going to get away with this bullshit over and over and over again.
well, okay, I hear you say
So let me
that, but
give this
see,
warning to Democrats: is Republicans are better at the game. So if you're convinced that you're going to win the next election doing the same thing you did the last few elections, you may be wrong. You may be wrong. We may not take back the White House just based on the sense of dissension towards Donald Trump. We may not take back the White House. Now,
well, okay, again, all I'm saying here, I haven't even got to the Democrats. First and foremost, the Democratic Party does not care what the Democratic electorate thinks. Going last year before the Democratic primaries, 70% of registered Democratic voters wanted an alternative to Joe Biden. 7-0. 70%. Okay. And several people were teeing up, including RFK Jr., who's a lifelong Democrat. Okay. Okay. We're teeing up. And the Democratic Party shut down the primary. They've moved the South Carolina primary up to be the first primary in the country when New Hampshire had historically been the first primary in the country. Now let's tell you this, let's get into that a little bit. New Hampshire, the Democratic Party, the National Democratic Party, ordered the Democratic Party of New Hampshire to move their primary so that South Carolina would occur after the Iowa caucus. The reason why the Democratic Party of New Hampshire could not do it is because the legislature in New Hampshire was Republican controlled and the governor was Republican. So the Republicans in New Hampshire were not going to help the Democratic Party rig the primary for Joe Biden. So they didn't let them do it. And so the Democratic Party of New Hampshire could not move the date. And so you know what the National Democratic Party did to the voters of New Hampshire? They they disenfranchised them. They said, because you did not move the vote and let South Carolina come first, the Democratic votes in the state of New Hampshire during the primary did not count. Okay? That's how anti-democratic the Democratic Party is. Okay? They jammed Joe Biden down the throats of Democrats. And they
and
did
so now I
so,
agree with you. I didn't realize that. I didn't
but
realize either one of those two steps. They
yeah,
jammed him. They jammed him down. They made him the candidate. Jammed him
they
down
made
the
him the
throat.
candidate.
They made him the
That's
candidate.
right. And
So here's the thing that
yes,
generally prevails in the Democratic. I call it the curia. The logic of the Democratic curia is
yes,
they fail. They
yeah,
screw the pooch. They did the same thing to Hillary. I'm glad Bernie Sanders was not our president. But they did the same thing to Bernie. They shut him down and they said Hillary is our candidate. No matter what the voters say, Hillary is
yes.
our candidate. And I told you
And
before, and I don't know if you agreed or not, but I said the statement that was made by Bernie Sanders having a list of 12 million young voters, adamant supporters, was not the statement I wanted to see for America. Because I felt like me being a capitalist, I don't think I would categorize you as a capitalist, but me being a capitalist, that 12 million young people gave up all hope of doing what we do best in America, and that's really succeeding financially. So, and we talked about this a little. They all submitted to the idea of socialism, free healthcare, free education, free. Bernie Sanders was going to deliver all that. And I say, you can, young people don't need young people need to still believe in the American dream. So let me leave it at that. Then we'll go on to. I like the idea of young people believing in the American dream. I don't like the idea of 12 million people believing that the American dream is gone, and really supporting a self-proclaimed socialist.
Coach, there is so much in that statement you made, but I'm going to respond to the American dream.
Or
Okay.
I or
Okay.
respond to the one thing when I said I don't consider you. Are you a capitalist?
First and foremost, wow, that to me, that's an incendiary type question
No, just
no,
don't answer it
I'm just
then.
saying. No,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. I have no other choice to answer it now. You know, I live in a free market capitalist system. And therefore, in order to protect myself, in order to earn money, I have to be competitive and I have to function in that system.
So you're a
The problem
capitalist.
is I'm a capitalist out of necessity. Yes,
Right.
because that's the reality of our situation. But as we have talked about, and maybe we'll get to that in this conversation, right? Capitalism has run its course. Capitalism as a system of economics requires perpetual growth. It does not work unless we grow. If we don't grow, it goes into depressions, right? And then people lose millions of jobs, and that's the kind of problem. But so we have to grow. The problem is growth requires the use of resources, and we are exceeding the carrying capacity of the earth.
So
We are
explain that. That's an important thing
okay.
that it's in your
Well,
book, and I really think it's something
yes,
I really want to get to today because we got
we
so much to cover over the next 10 sessions. But this is one thing I really
yes,
want to be the first time we start covering Kevin Howard one step at a time.
absolutely. So right now there is a statistic called Global Overshoot Day. Global Overshoot Day is the day of the year where we have extracted a year's worth of natural resources. Our consumption has utilized a year's worth of natural resources. And so let me unpack that. We actually measure, we actually know how much natural resource the earth can replenish in a year. And we also track how much natural resource we extract in order to support the global economy. So the global overshoot day is the day of the year when the global economy has extracted a full year's natural resource. That day in 2024 was May 2nd. So for the rest of 2024, after May 2nd,
We're utilizing the
we
following year's resources
we're drawing down natural resources that would be available for future generations.
due to
Right.
sustainability.
And well, if we want, no, sustainability is another issue. My point is, capitalism is requiring us to use more and more and more natural resources, and we are already drawing out more natural resources than the earth can replenish. This will cause real natural resource scarcity, right? Okay, so we need a system of economics that's not socialism, that wasn't invented in the 1800s and capitalism was invented in the 1700s. We need to innovate a new system of economics that can sustain within the planetary boundaries of the earth. In other words, we can't use our resources in a way that denies our children and their children and their children the resources they need to survive. We
Right.
need economics that can function at equilibrium. Capitalism can't. It either has to grow or it contracts.
So that
It
was
simply
something.
systemically can't function this way. And so that's why we need a new economics. And serious economists are working on that. Okay.
So then
But
when
we
we
need to
got to
get
that
out of our
conversation.
head. Yeah. I'm sorry, coach.
No, no. When we got into that conversation, I just presented the ideological notion. So then I went into like I said, it was kind of crazy. So I went into the Elon Musk piece. I said, okay, so should I do it or should I not go into the Elon Musk
Go ahead
piece?
and do it, coach. Go ahead and
Okay.
give them the,
So I
yes.
said, I guess I said I wasn't impressed with the administrator Donald Trump is because the bromance of Elon Musk and him fell out. Now they're calling each other out. One saying I'm going to have you deported, the other saying I'm going to unload what I know about the Epstein files. They're in this crazy argument. Elon Musk came to the government with a helping hand. Said, I want to help. He created DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. And I said, and what I said was earlier, what I said was, and I thought it was kind of worth repeating on the podcast that I wasn't able to video, or I'm just an idiot and I didn't video. But I said, let's take the Department of Government Efficiency and let's take Elon Musk as an administrator. So I use the example, I use the in comparison and contrast NASA versus SpaceX. I did it in a way that was actually essentially wrong, so I'm gonna try to do it a little differently. I feel like SpaceX is more effective, has a better track record of getting results faster, sooner. So I said, and what SpaceX does versus NASA is NASA does everything on paper. And then finally, after the paper trail is developed, and it's sort of like I called it paralysis through analysis. Finally, they put a mission out. Whereas SpaceX launches a rocket, it crashes, they learn from the crash. And it seems like they've had some superior expedited results over and above NASA's year. NASA has accomplished a lot of things, but it seems like SpaceX has accomplished a lot of things much faster. So I said, so now you take Doge, which was essentially a giant failure, and I used numbers. So essentially, Doge came in, Elon Musk, the director of Doge, came in and said, we're going to find $2 trillion in taxpayer savings and taxpayer waste. Then that figure was dumbed down quickly to $1 trillion. At the end, at the final exit interview, Elon Musk sitting with the cabinet, saying goodbye to the Trump administration. The figure was $164 billion saved. Not 2 trillion, not 1 trillion. We're down to $164 billion. And what it seems like to me, and the real result was about $9.5 trillion in rescissions. That's all I really see in savings from the Doge initial effort. I said, let's rekindle Doge. Let's use the same logic. Doge crashed and burned, but what did we learn from that crash and burn? Because failure can be a key to success. And I said, so now we've got to redefine our economy in a way that doesn't use its 1 year's worth of resources 5 months into the year. How do we get to that point where we're not doing what you say we're doing? We're not what is it called? The date? What is the date called? On the May.
Global Overshoot Day,
The global overshoot day is May. What is the date?
second.
May
May
2nd.
2nd.
How do we
Yeah.
read? How do we stay in a capitalist? And we talked about certain things like load power mini nuclear power plants combined with solar plants, and the idea that that would really save the need for the fossil fuel that we're dwindling down by May 2nd for that year. And how do we redefine the Department of Government Efficiency? How let's include everything. And another example I used was the example of recently, Pete Hegseth was going over a video. 11 drug traffickers were on a boat bringing over a boatload of drugs, and the administration said it's on. And then comes this bomb sailing out of the air. You can't see what launched the missile, but you can see the missile ultimately connecting with the boat, and the boat gone. 11 drug dealers are gone. The drugs are gone. The boat's gone. So the question was asked by a media person: Was that a was that a fighter jet? Was that a drone? Well, I can't answer that, but there is a feeling of we can redefine how we build and fund and how we equip our military a lot more cost effectively than $50 million fighter jets. Now there's a sense of we can really do it with $10,000 drones. We can do a lot of stuff with $8 and $10,000 drones. So that could fall under the Department of Government Efficiency. How do we redefine our military? How do we redefine the equipment needs? And then I said, we're going to get the pushback from local congressmen who are going to not want to lose those big contracts to build those big planes in their districts. They're going to, but so when we have this Doge report that we should be doing it this way, and we should be doing it this way, we should be doing this way, and we should be doing this way, are we ultimately saving natural resources by redefining how we do things? And it's like you said, a lot of natural resources can be saved by how we build things that we use every day. If we build a refrigerator, it literally lasts 30 years versus 8 years, and every 8 years that refrigerator winds up in the landfill. We're saving landfill space, and we've got a refrigerator literally almost be 4 times the lifespan than before. So that was my idea of recreating Doge, was analyzing every aspect of government, everything we either do right or wrong, and putting that report out. And I even used the analogy of the kids timing out of foster care. These kids turn 18 and we
Coach,
throw them to the
Coach,
world.
Coach, I mean, to anyone listening to what you just said, we have gone from your original question was, how can we elect a Democrat, you know, to a series of issues. All of them are very interesting. Some of them are not related in terms of, but the idea is there's too many issues there. So let us deal with these issues, but we can't deal with them all in one cluster like that. So I can't respond. So what I'm asking, okay, we had a presidential election where the Democratic Party proved to the American electorate that their nominee was the greater of two evils. We need to take the implications of that. If you look at the data that I presented and you verify the data in the marketplace, you will see this is not angry white men. This is not misogynists. This is not racist. This is not homophobes. That element is in every electorate. This is every aspect of America in every region of the country moving towards Trump. So this is the American electorate standing together in a way that they haven't stood together in many generations. We need to take from that. Okay, that is what produced this next term. So, okay, we can, if you want to dig a little deeper into how Trump was able to put that coalition together, I submit to you, and I cover this in the book, that one of the things that the media, establishment media, has disturbed us in understanding how these things happen is how they cover events. So last August, during the Democratic convention, when they nominated Kamala Harris, Donald Trump was meeting with RFK Jr. Donald Trump literally moved to the center of the country. We like to think of Donald Trump as a fascist. I hate that word in that application. We like to think of Donald Trump as extremely to the right. Donald Trump moved to the center. And how did he do that? By aligning with centrist Democrats. RFK Jr. is a lifelong centrist Democrat and was the most popular independent candidate in the United States in an election cycle where independents represent more voters than both the Democratic and Republican parties, registered voters. I'm just saying. So the biggest pool of voters, their most popular candidate last year was RFK Jr. Trump reached out to RFK, or how about this? Oh, yes, Trump reached out to RFK during the Democratic convention and was able to convince RFK that if he suspended his campaign and joined Trump, that Trump would allow him he would appoint him to be head of HHS, and he can make America healthy again. What he was trying to do. Okay. RFK Jr. contacted the Kamala Harris campaign to see if they would work with him. And the Kamala Harris campaign refused to meet with him. Okay, fine. So he made the decision. He didn't know if he could trust Trump, but he made the decision that he would throw his support for Trump because Trump seemed to be committed that he would hire him as Secretary of
And he
HHS,
kept
and
his
he would.
word.
And okay, we'll get to that. Right. Okay. He, but he made alliance with Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard is a centrist. No, she's not barely a centrist Democrat. She's a Democratic She's a Democrat out of the Hawaiian Democratic Party. Anyone knows anything about Hawaiian politics understands that Hawaii is a very progressive state. This is not blue dog Democrats. This is not Dixiecrat Democrats in Hawaii. But yes, you could characterize Tulsi Gabbard because of her military background as a centrist Democrat. She was one of the leading candidates for president of the United States in the 2020 election. She did better than Kamala Harris right, in the 2020 election for the Democratic nomination. Okay, so she's a centrist Democrat. Elon Musk, his entire life. Look at the candidates he supports. Look, I mean, he is a centrist Democrat. When when Donald Trump allied with centrist Democrats, that sent the signal to the independents that he was moving to the center. And that's what he did. And then you're right, he honored it. For you would think progressives who have pined away, and I would consider myself a progressive, who have pined away for years for women to be given an opportunity to serve in positions of authority that historically they have not been given the opportunity. The nomination of Tulsi Gabbard as the DNI, the head of the director of national intelligence. No woman has ever run the CIA, run the Defense Intelligence Agency, run all 11 agencies.
11.
Now there's 11. Oh, they've consolidated some. Okay, fine. The point being is
I'm not
this.
sure, actually. I thought it was 17, actually, but
Yeah, I thought it was 11, but okay, it is a number of them. My point being is that instead of celebrating that someone like Trump would nominate Tulsi Gabbard, who used to be the darling of the Democratic Party before Hillary Clinton ran her out of town because she opposed our efforts to overthrow Assad in Syria. We don't have to get into that story because Tulsi Gabbard, go and look at her testimony when she was testifying to be to
well, we're
director
not going to get
of
into that
national
story because actually
intelligence.
that was because
Yeah, yeah,
Putin
no,
moved
someone else.
all
No,
his assets out of Syria
yeah,
into.
I want the listeners to go look at Tulsi Gabbard's testimony where she defended the nonsense that Hillary Clinton did to push her out of the Democratic Party. But the idea is she's a genuine Democrat, right? Donald Trump reached across the aisle and pulled centrist Democrats. And this in a close election, in an election that he won 49% of the vote and Kamala Harris won 47% of the vote, he got the most popular and compelling people for independence in the country to join him, right? Okay, so this is why he won. Okay, so what can we do now that he won and the American public has spoken, right? We can look within what he's doing and see what can I support in this realm. Believe me, I make my bones what bones are left as a climate risk management and sustainability consultant. Let me be the first to tell you Donald Trump destroyed my business model by sending a signal to the financial services industry that the federal government is not going to be participating in climate, nor are they going to be enforcing any regulations for climate. The SEC says they're not going to defend their own regulations in court, and that told the commercial banking no need to make any changes. My whole consultant business was focused on helping top 100 banks make strategic plans for how to manage their climate risk. That is dead. I had to recalibrate my whole business this year.
Well, it
So
could
my
come
point
back.
is, yeah, well, here's the thing. My point is, so I'm not in love with Donald Trump, right?
No.
But what I can say is that I stand with the people who voted for him. And
Well, let me
why?
say this for Donald
No, but
Trump.
see,
Brilliant move.
we have to acknowledge the 77.3 million Americans and who they were. I covered this in the book. The counties who voted for Donald Trump represent 40% of the of the GDP, gross domestic product of the country. 40%. The counties who voted for Kamala Harris represent 60%. even though there were less people involved, right? Okay. The disenfranchised American working class and American middle class are who voted for Trump. And guess what? I stand with them because it is the policies of the neocons and the neoliberals, Clinton, W, Obama, and Biden, who betrayed the American middle class and betrayed the American working class and disenfranchised them. And they have consolidated. They supported Bernie Sanders on the Democratic side. And when the Democratic Party rigged the 2016 primaries and then rigged the 2020 primaries to defeat Bernie Sanders, they shifted to Donald Trump. So
No, so
for those people out there who hate Donald Trump, go protest the DNC
I
because
don't hate Donald Trump.
no, no,
I
oh, hey, I'm not saying, I didn't say you.
No, no, no. I was trying to make
I,
a point because that's a sort of gives me the opportunity to jump in real quick and say what I've told you what I hate about him. First of all, let me say brilliant decision to bring on two centrists. Let me say you might have answered one of my questions early on was who could be a presidential candidate for either party. And maybe I'm not I wouldn't want to see RFK be a presidential candidate, but I would like to see Tulsi Gabbard try her hand at running for president again. I don't know what she would decide. Maybe she'd decide to be a Republican this time. Funny thing about it is, I have a meeting with the RNC, the Lake County, Florida RNC, Tuesday morning. I'm not
okay.
adamantly opposed to Republicans, but they had one particular guy running the RNC, and it switched. And I had some guests on my show. One was running for the school board. One was retiring after 15 years from the school board. One was Daryl Blackhall, who runs Orlando. And we talked about that switch a little. And the new guy really appeals to me. He's not a centrist. He's a conservative, but he's not the conservative that the guy was before. So when it comes to the idea of maybe Tulsi Gabbard will run for president, maybe on the Republican ticket, because maybe she is fed up with the Democratic Party, or maybe the Democratic Party would never come to the realization that she would be a great candidate. They're going to try and get some person I don't particularly care for, like Andrea Ocasio-Cortez, to be their candidate. And then I would very much be a Republican from that day forward, because if J.D. Vance was not their candidate and Tulsi Gabbard was their candidate, it would be the easiest decision in the world if the Democrats had Andrea Ocasio-Cortez as their candidate, because I could tell you what party I would be vying for and who I would be voting for on that ticket. But you just answered my question. It was a great decision he made to bring on some centrists and to say, how did he swing all these particular demographics, like the age groups and all, is because the election was decided by independents. They always said that.
It was
They
decided by
said the election
independents.
will be decided by independents. The swing states will be decided by independents. So it could very well be those two centrists were the ones that brought in the seven swing states for Donald Trump.
Absolutely. I'm telling you, RFK decided this election.
Not
And he
or
went,
Tulsi Gabbard. We don't
well,
know.
okay. Tulsi Gabbard absolutely was very supportive. I'm not trying to diminish Tulsi
Was
Gabbard.
very
I'm just saying
helpful.
we don't have the polling data on Tulsi
No, but we
Gabbard because
don't
she
need it to
wasn't
come
running.
to
No, no, no.
speculate.
She is well respected. I agree with that. She's well respected. Totally agree with that. We just have the polling data in a very active people like Dr. Cornel West, Jill Stein. There was very active third party folks who gathered millions of votes, and so we have the data, and RFK Jr. was the
But
strongest
who is
candidate in
Jill
that.
Stein? She's just a
No, no,
disruptor. She has no
we
chance of
don't
ever
have to
being
go, no, no, no,
president.
no. Coach, I'm not trying to go down that rabbit hole of no, no. All I'm saying here is of a very active independent field, third party field this year, the most popular person
Was RFK. Well,
was RFK Jr.
he's been
Yeah,
the most
now,
popular independent ever. He's
yes,
other than
and it
Ross Perot,
yes,
who
and the thing is, an indication of his popularity was he had asked his voters to not vote for him, to vote for Donald Trump. And he tried to pull himself off the ballots in all the swing states. And the Democratic Party fought and preventing him from pulling the ballots, his name off the ballots. And so what actually happened is people still voted for him. So even though he told his people not to vote for him, they still voted for him. And the interesting thing about it is Jill Stein got the most third-party votes, largely because she was anti-genocide, right? And I tip my hat to her for that, right? But she got like 850,000 votes. RFK Jr., telling his people not to vote for him, got 750,000 votes. I mean, that's how popular he was, that he almost got more votes than Jill Stein, who was trying to get as many votes as she could, of course, right? That's how popular he was. So yes, it was a big move on Trump's part to move to the center. And what I'm saying to you here is, let's talk about RFK Jr. because the RFK Jr. is a wonderful example of why our society is toxic, is incendiary, the vitriol is off the charts. We have been we have been encouraged to reduce each other to the stupidest things we've ever done, to the most unagreeable things that we've ever done, as if any of us are just the dumbest things we've ever done. Okay, so anyone who knows the body of work of RFK Jr. does not think he is anti-science, does not think he's a wacko,
Well, you
does
pointed
not
out
think
to me.
does not think right. If you this is one of the most significant and successful environmental lawyers in American history. And what he did to save to force chemical companies and big industrial companies to clean up the Hudson River Valley in New York, 100 years from now, people will be talking about the work he did. Okay. What he is trying to do in nutrition in the United States, right, is, I mean, is unbelievably important, right? That his critique of science is for-profit science, not science. If let's hone in on the vaccine issue, because that's where he gets. Besides for the bullshit, he dragged a dead bear in Central Park,
Well,
crazy
I
stuff,
never heard that, but
and some bug was eating his brain. No, everyone takes the craziest things that he's ever done as if that's all his life has been. No, okay, but let's touch the real third rail. Him being the anti-vaxxer. Okay, when people all the goodwill that all the talking heads and most people who think about vaccines have for vaccines came during a period of time when vaccine manufacturers were doing it as a public service. It was being done by generic manufacturers. The most famous of all vaccines is the polio vaccine developed by Dr. Jonas Salk. And Dr. Salk, they asked him, why aren't you patent protecting your vaccine? And his response was, it would be like patenting the sunlight. Okay. That is the goodwill. That is the massive impact on life expectancy that vaccines have had when, for most of the history of vaccines, right, they were done by people who were doing a public service. And the cost of getting vaccinated was low. This wasn't branded pharmaceuticals. No. What has happened to vaccines? In 1986, the for-profit big pharma start lobbying Congress hard to change the rules on how we regulate vaccines. And by I think it was 86, 87, 88, they established two huge benefits to okay. One is that vaccines did not have to go through the same level of clinical trials that every other drug has to go through for approval. And two, vaccine that if you are hurt by a vaccine, the pharmaceutical industry was given liability protection, that the maximum claim for any injury due to a vaccine was $100,000. So they were given liability protection and the due diligence the clinical trials to assess the safety of the vaccine was reduced for vaccines in a way that no other drug gets done. So once it happened in 1986, 1987, at that time we only had 8 vaccines, okay? And they were done by generic manufacturers at low cost. Now that the for-profit industry changed the rules on vaccine, they flooded the zone, squeezed out all the generics. Now we have what? 38, 40 vaccines? Okay. Okay. RFK's criticism is what happened to vaccines in the for-profit era. For anyone to say that what for-profit scientists do aligns with the ethics of science, pure science, just tell me where the facts lead, I go where the facts lead, is very naive.
So let me say
No,
this. Hang on.
for-profit scientists do science that drives the profit line, that drives the bottom line. I'm just saying, in the 60s, the tobacco scientists prove that cigarette smoking caused cancer, and yet they failed with their industry to disclose that they did. And that didn't come out until the 90s when Brown and Williamson documents were leaked. And then the tobacco industry had to negotiate a $20 billion settlement by John McCain with the Clinton administration in 98. My point being is the for-profit scientists had told us that hidden the fact that it causes cancer, and they had proved it. Okay, we know the scientists for Big Pharma created the opioid epidemic in the United States in the 1990s. Oh, my, this is all the for-profit scientists. And how about the scientists at ExxonMobil who had proved that greenhouse that oil and natural gas produce greenhouse gas emissions that warm the planet in the 70s, and they modeled exactly how it was going to do, but no one said anything. Okay. Okay. What I'm trying to say is RFK's critique of for-profit science is for-profit science is poisoning us, is destroying the world, is hurting the customers. Right. It is not to be trusted. It doesn't fall under the rubric of the scientists at NOAA or the scientists at the Department of Energy. Not for profit science is science.
So we're at a
For profit science has proven to be harmful to us, and we don't give it the same credibility. And I can tell you, his critique of the vaccines is spot on and verifiable and scientifically endorsed. So
and so we're at a good
he's trying to
point.
establish science from a not-for-profit perspective to validate the safety of vaccines. That work has not been done. And anyone that says just because the work has not been done means that it hasn't been proven that vaccines are unhealthy, that's not how it works. The burden on the manufacturer is to prove it's healthy before you inject it to our children. And
Okay,
that's what we're doing right now.
so we're at a good point where you've made a great point. And
Thank you.
I suddenly today am enlightened. This is why I'm stopping you because I can't imagine you make the point any better than that. I'm not going to say I'm sold, but I
Okay.
am definitely convinced to do further research on RFK, the man, the mission, the sense of mission, and now the HHS director. And I have said, even before this podcast privately, that it was a wonderful decision for Donald Trump to make to bring on Tulsi Gabbard and RFK. I'm just summarizing because I think we're at a good point where we're going to get into it again and really do another session of just this. The book, Onward at Last by Kevin Howard. The book is Onward at Last, 2024 Presidential Election Edition by Kevin Howard. There is so much to unpack in this book. You can't just read the book and know what you were thinking. You got to really listen to these podcasts and read the book as well. It's kind of like the book and the movie. Which is better? Well, the two combined are even better. So I am convinced. I agree. I'm not saying sold, but I'm convinced I need to rethink RFK. And I've told you why I'm not a fan of RFK for the fact that I'm not a fan of the Kennedys. But that's okay. That's here nor there. Then the other thing I wanted to wrap up with, and I'm going to let you wrap it up, was I know I went too far on the idea of Doge, but the one thing that I always want to preface if I get the opportunity is the kids that are timing out of foster care? Would it be better spent that we build academies or universities with dorms and take these and give these kids the opportunity have a home for 4 years in a college that drops life on them, that teaches them life skills, that teaches them a career, that enables them to apply with corporate America? Because there is a simple fact that the only simple fact I'm going to point out on this particular topic is 50% of kids that time out of foster care are never gainfully employed in their life. That's a fact.
Oh, that's
So
devastating,
that's
coach.
what I'm saying about Doge is would it, from the point of a Department of Government efficiency, would it be money well spent? Would the return on investment be enormous if we invested in these kids rather than just throwing them to the wolves? And I go on to these tangents about different things about what happens to these because I'm not going to do that today. And I say we're at a really good point to wrap this one up. I love the I am giving Donald Trump credit for bringing on Tulsi Gabbard and RFK. I I lived in Hawaii for 2 years. I know what Hawaii politics is all about because politics is a big part of my life. So whether the fact that I was just a surfer and a stoner doesn't change the fact that I wasn't really a surfer.
Coach.
I wasn't really a surfer, that's for sure. I was never ever got any good at it, but I definitely enjoyed being on the beach, trying to get better at it, and then ultimately
Yes.
just doing what we do, whatever we do on the beach. But I did know more about I do know about Hawaii politics to an extent, just because politics is a very big part of my life.
Yeah.
I'm ready to wrap this one up. I want to hear more about. I want you I'll say the old like, share, subscribe, comment. I'll ask everybody in their comments. We are rebranding. We're going to take the name out of Political No Brainer. We're not going to change much about the podcast other than we're looking for a new name that doesn't have politics in it because politics is toxic. Unfortunately, it is what it is. It's just toxic. So we're looking for a new name. If you got an idea of what we should call it, Kevin's come up with some great ideas. Um, then Kevin, wrap it up.
Well, Coach, I would want to say I've loved the conversation. Every conversation with you is a joy, and because you ask these questions, you're apt to go in different directions. So I got to stay nimble and be ready where we're going to go. And but I got to tell you, thank you so much. Look forward to the next
And
conversation.
we had a great day today. We
And we
had
had a great day
a
today.
team building day today.
And for all of you out there, if you haven't been to the state of Florida, wow, we have such a beautiful country. Go check out Florida. It is no, I won't say that. It is a great state in its own right. I was going to give it a compliment, but then it sounded like a backhanded thing. So definitely go check out Florida. And Coach, looking forward to the next conversation. You all take care. Do your homework. Check
I
out.
am. So the next conversation is going to be a big part. It's going to be RFK. Who is RFK?
Yeah.
I would actually like the administration to put some feeders out, some information out about RFK because
Well, if you go to their website, www.maha.org, or it could be http colon / maha
I'm going to do
dot org.
maha.org and it's going to
Yeah,
pop up.
yeah, and check out what they actually stand for in terms of how to. It's not just a slogan. Of course, Trump, he's a marketing guy. He's going to come up with a slogan, right? But it's far more substantive than that. And real serious experts, not-for-profit experts, and scientific research backs up what they're saying. So check it out.
I am going to check it out. I'm going to preface one more point and then we're going to wrap it up.
Sounds good.
Today, in our first series with Kevin Howard, we've only covered the first page of the what you sent me, the 35 pages that summarizes the book. And
Yes.
we are going to do this page by page because there is so much good information here that I do dance around subjects. I do challenge you on your answers, and I think it's
Yes. I love
okay.
it.
I
I
think,
love
yeah, I
it.
do. I like it. I mean, I tell people I'm a good listener, but man, I'm a good interrupter too. So, we're doing this again, Kevin. Like we talked about, we're gonna do it about once a week.
Yeah.
We're definitely gonna really, and then who knows, by the time we get through this, you might have a new book out because
There we
we
go.
wanna.
But I'm going to stick with this one for a while because this needs to get out we need a new narrative so that we can reclaim our individual. sovereignty.
And that's something we haven't even gotten into. That we
Yes.
didn't even graze the surface of that. We
Indeed,
did
indeed. But
not.
we're doing good. We're covering what we need to
I
cover.
don't
We've
want to
given
rush it. I don't
folks
want to rush it. I
plenty.
want to do it like we're doing baby steps. I think if we rushed it, we wouldn't give it justice. This book really
Exactly.
needs overanalyzing,
Well,
extreme analyzing.
I appreciate the opportunity. You all take care, and this conversation will be continued.
Thank you, Kevin. Kevin Howard. Onward at Last 2024 presidential election edition. If you haven't gotten it, get it. It's available on in every version, online,
Amazon,
audio,
online,
Amazon, bookstores. Right?
and
Tell us. Tell us where
it's
it's available.
available in hardcover, soft cover, a paperback, ebook, audiobook with the narrator is Carolyn Johnny. She did a wonderful job. You can get it at Barnes and Nobles, Amazon, your local bookstore, or you can go to my website, https colon / onwardatlass.com.
Laura, if we can get that
ONWARDAT.com.
Laura, if we
Yes,
can get that on the website, that'll be great too. If you can email me, I'll forward that to Laura. Thanks,
I sure
Kevin.
will.
Thank you,
Hey,
Kevin.
it was great, Coach. See you
It
tomorrow.
was fabulous. I'll see you tomorrow. Yes, we'll have coffee at Wawa.
Sounds good. Send me a text for where you want to meet.
I will. I will. I'll see you tomorrow morning. This has been a great day. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for you've literally flew out here from from
Washington.
Washington State. I keep
Yes,
getting Oregon in my head. Man, this is just an incredible friendship. It's going to be a lifelong friendship. I've had a great day today. I'm looking forward to more and more and more of them. Thanks, Kevin. Talk to you soon.
you take care.
Take care, buddy.
Bye now.
Bye, buddy.